Hey guys, ArchieLuxury channel. Today's question is, am I too poor to own a Patek Philippe? Very, very good question. So, what sort of level of wealth do you need to get a Patek Philippe? Now, let's be totally honest. You may be able to buy a Patek Philippe in Australia, $34,800. That is the price retail for a 5196. That's probably the most classic Calatrava in the range there. It's just a very iconic. But that doesn't mean that's it. See, before you get to the stage where you buy this single Patek, it's like getting a Rolls Royce or a car like a Ferrari or what's a good example? A Porsche 911. That's normally not your one and done car. This is a car that you use for special occasions. If you wear it every day, obviously it's going to be rather costly, and it's not that convenient to live with. Let's be totally honest. Having a 911 could be fun as a weekend treat, but if you're driving it every day, it's awful. Low down, expensive servicing costs, repairs. You don't want to have that as an everyday car. Now, with watches, by the time you get to the phase where you say, I want a Patek Philippe, you're not a 20-year-old man. You're normally the wrong side of 40, okay? Approaching 50. Did you know the average Patek buyer, late 40s, early 50s? That's correct. That's exactly right. And did you know a man normally has the highest earning potential at 47? That is when? That's the optimum age to buy a very expensive, like an S-Class Mercedes, like a big boat. Why? Because they're at their earning peak. The kids are starting to finish school and college. They're starting to have more money left over. They're at an earning peak, and they haven't started worrying about retirement. Give it a couple years, and they'll want to put it into their retirement because they're worried they don't have enough money. But that's the ultimate age to make big, expensive purchases. So we're talking about someone in their mid to late 40s, perfectly like my age. I'm 48. Perfect. So the average person who wants to buy a Patek Philippe, what have they already got? Well, they've probably got a Rolex steel sports watch. They've probably got some sort of chronograph like a Speedmaster. They've possibly got a couple other pieces. They might have a Tudor. They might have a couple other Rolex. Generally, we're talking about collectors who have between 3 and 7 pieces. And then they decide, you know what? I've always wanted a Patek Philippe. Now, this buyer here, when they say Patek Philippe, the two most common types of Pateks they would be looking at would be precious metal on a strap. Here's two classic examples. This one here, manual wind. This one here, automatic. So in Australia, the 5196 is 34,800. An automatic Patek, okay, at the moment they've only got the 5227, but these would be around about the same price as the 5119, about 40,000 Aussie dollars. So US dollars, $20,000 to $30,000. So you might say, well, that's not ridiculous. However, By the time they're in their mid-40s, they've already got a couple Rolexes. They've got a house that's almost paid for. They've got some investments. They've got some retirement funds for a rainy day. They've got a decent career. They've possibly been divorced once or twice before. So we're gearing up. So the question is, how much, what net worth does someone need to be able to get one of these babies? And it really does depend on where you live. If you were in an expensive capital city like Sydney, Melbourne, New York, San Francisco, obviously the figure would be a lot more compared to Brisbane or in the flyover state. So it really does depend on where you are. But I will give you both numbers. I'm going to give you both numbers. If you were in a lower cost state, I would say you need to be worth at least $1.5 million. That's correct. You should be worth at least $1.5 million before you buy a Patek Philippe. If you are in Sydney or New York, San Fran, the figure's going to be a lot more. It's going to be more like $3 million. You need a net worth. Now, net worth, that includes everything. Your house, any assets you have there, investment properties, shares, retirement funds, that's an asset. A business you might own, that's correct. So I would say if you're in a more expensive city, before you buy a Patek, are you worth at least $3 million? $3 million, that's right. You should not consider a Patek Philippe unless you are worth $3 million. Now, the reality is you don't have to be worth $3 million to buy a Patek, but I'm talking about a guy who has a wife, couple of kids. He has a career to earn this money. Technically speaking, a 20-year-old who's worked for a couple of years, they could buy a Patek Philippe. There's no problems. However, that's not what I'm saying. This video here is for the masses. And in my opinion, if you're in a lower cost state, you need to be worth at least $1.5 million. Why do I say that? Well, if you are worth considerably less than these figures I've quoted, you're always going to be constantly thinking of selling it. You're going to say, hey, you know, I could sell that. It's gonna be a situation where this is a substantial drain. You're always going to be considering, if only, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. You need to have a foundation, a reserve of wealth where it doesn't really matter. Let me add another thing into this mix. We can also substitute Patek Philippe 5196 or a 5296 5127 5107 6006. We could also substitute that. These same rules apply to a Rolex day date. Day date, that's correct. If you're in a low cost state, you've got to be net worth at least $1.5 million. If you were in a high cost city, $3 million minimum. And what about currency? You say, oh, is that Aussie dollars or US dollars? If you're in Australia, those figures, $1.5 million and $3 million apply. If you're in America, it's $1.5 million US dollars. And it's 3 million plus US dollars. That is the figures. I am sorry. I am sorry you may not like these figures here. You may not like these figures, but this is the honest truth. This is what you need to be worth to buy. Otherwise, you're always going to be saying, should I have bought it? Oh, I should have used it for this. Oh, I should have used it for that. Unless you are worth that sort of money, you are fooling yourself. $1.5 million. That's what you need to be worth to buy a Patek Philippe. Now, there is no communist state that you need to prove you're worth $1.5 million to buy. As long as you've got the money to pay the sticker price, it's all good. But that's only start of it. Somebody who has a Patek 5196, you don't normally wear that as a daily wearer. You need a couple of steel sports watches to wear. You need a fun weekend watch. You need a chronograph. You need a couple variety. And then you get the Patek as the creme de la creme. The Patek movie, to my son, this is a perfect example. Look at the men in this video, the actors playing the parts. They are all late 40s, early 50s type of guys. Why? Because that's the demographic who buys Patek. When this person gets a bit older, they're going to be worried about retirement savings. So that's a very small glimpse. The Patek market is basically men from 45 to 55. After that, they're worried about retirement. That's exactly it. So guys, I hope this guide helps you. Tell me what you think of the numbers I've mentioned here. I got the balls to tell you the figures. If you don't want to accept what I say as being realistic, well, there's nothing I can really do. I tell you the best advice I can give you. Tell me what you think, guys. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, and I will see you in the next one. Hi guys, ArchieLuxury. And who do I recommend in America? In America, who do I recommend for quality pre-owned wristwatches? David SW, David SW, David SW. Go to davidsw.com. He is the best, the greatest pre-owned dealer in all of the United States of America. David SW, David SW, David SW. Hey guys, ArchieLuxury. Who do I recommend for watches in Brisbane and Sydney? Vintage Watch Co. That's correct. Vintage Watch Co. in Brisbane Arcade in Brisbane and the Strand Arcade in Sydney. Vintage Watch Co. Brisbane and Sydney. Ronnie, I've known him since the late 90s. Ronnie is a top bloke. Luke is a great guy. Vintage Watch Co. That is who I recommend in Australia. Check out Vintage Watch Co. and the guys' amazing range of watches. They also do service and repairs. Vintage Watch Co. That is where the Pontiff goes. You know, some of my Pateks came from Vintage Watch Co. That's right, guys. Vintage Watch Co.